Welcome Lifestyle family to another episode of After Dark with KK. How have the new year been treating you so far? A new year might signify a new hope at work or a new work environment with new colleagues or superiors that you hope to build a rapport with. Or recently you have moved to a new place of residence which you have been hopeful of. Or once again, did you do your due diligence to find out about the history of the place? I have shared so many scary tales of haunted abode, and somehow all were a bit different from the next, and none was less scary. Today's first story was on Chin Chai Toon, a Malaysian horror theme animation creator on the YouTube. His style of storytelling tends to be a bit earnest and a bit cheeky to highlight the animator's personality, which could be a bit polarizing to the general audience. The following story shared to Chin Chai was perhaps the scariest I have heard from his channel so far, so let's begin. Hi, my name is Atai. I was originally from Kedah, a northern state in West Malaysia. I have been working in the same trading company in the capital city of Kuala Lumpur for 5 years now. As it was not a big company and due to my quiet nature, I had not made many friends at work, and similarly, I did not have many contacts outside work in this sprawling city. Without much social distractions, I channeled a lot of energy and time into my work and gradually got promoted into a junior manager. With my pay increments, I was able to afford a small apartment unit instead of having to rent a small room like what I did for the past few years. I had no qualms with this particular unit, despite the lack of natural sunlight due to the location, painting the house in a constant eerie darkness. With some warm lighting installed, I actually felt it suited me during my time chilling and resting at home. However, a few weeks into my lodging in this new apartment, I started to feel I was not the only resident of this unit. Once, when I was shaving in the bathroom, something emerged from the reflection of the mirror that gave me the most spine-chilling scare of my life. I was not a traditional nor cultured soul, but I'm sure I saw a lady all donned in Chinese opera costume appearing at my rear, but as instant as she appeared, she would disappear at the blink of the eyes. From that day onwards, I could feel a presence in the apartment time and again. I really did not know what got over my head, perhaps due to the curiosity, or perhaps I was being too lonely. I actually uttered these words while I was alone in my house. I know you are around, perhaps we can live amicably in this humble abode. That night, I reaped what I sowed. As I was in deep sleep, I was starting to get bothered with Chinese opera music playing within my room. It was followed by her singing, filled with melody and threat.
You want to be my friend? How do you know I'm the friendly kind?
The sinister laughter turned into a cheerly weeping. I must admit, I'm not one to get scared easily. But what transpired that night really shook me deep into my core. Before I mustered enough courage to open my eyes, I could feel long slender fingers wrapping around my neck, and my airway was gradually being cut off and I was losing air into my lungs. Then I saw her, the same Chinese opera lady with a menacing smile, while I could still hear her weeping. It was barely a few seconds, I sort of lost consciousness, before I suddenly shot up into an upright position as I could feel cold sweat amassing on my forehead and all over my body. I started to wonder if what I experienced was a nightmare, but to me, it seemed so real. The following nights, I tend to fall asleep very soon after coming home from a long day at work, yet my sound sleep was disrupted by sleep paralysis on a nightly basis. The scariest part of this episodic paralysis was the accompaniment of the Chinese opera music. For the first 2 nights, the paralysis ended in a minute or two without any scary haunting visuals. It got increasingly bad, and eventually, she would appear in front of my bed, doing her opera performance with the music like she was taunting me. At the beginning, I suspected it could be my bedroom where the haunting was prevalent. I started sleeping in the living room on my couch and even laying the mattress at the kitchen once, but the routine haunting continued raging wherever and whenever I sleep. This disruptive sleep routine took a toll on me at work, and I started to falter. And after an uncharacteristic telling off by my superior, a co-worker called Dan came and checked on me. I usually was not receptive to telling my personal issues to people at work, but I was at wit's end and just poured out my predicament to Dan.
Hey Atai, I have a relative who is a practicing medium with his own temple. Perhaps I could ask him if he could help.
That would be great, Dan. I gratefully reciprocated. It was not as great as I thought, as Dan passed me 4 talismans the following day and instructed me to secure them at the 4 corners of my bed before asking me to pay 5,000 ringgit for the service. I became fully awake when I heard the exorbitant price, but I did enlisted Dan's help, and if it could ward off the entity, it was a small token. So that night, with bravado, I laid the talisman as instructed and lay myself to sleep with a certain degree of glee. Not before too long, I realized that I was the real joke, as this time round, she would appear face on, echoing her laughter while the same operatic music raged on.
Do you think these pieces of paper will work?
Well, at least she did spare me with any physical altercation, as I continued to assume the role of being the prey she was toying with. The next day, I confronted Dan for scamming me for my money. Dan looked legitimately taken aback, and I could sense the guilt in him. He immediately called the same religious relative who would drop by my place that Saturday morning and proceed with his ritual, which I will not get into details. Generally, I wasn't paying too much attention. After the rituals, the medium told me due to a friendly discount, he would merely charge me 10,000 ringgit. Paying that freaking ransom was not the worst thing for me that day. As I was taking a nap that afternoon on the couch, I immediately realized that it was another futile religious intervention. This time round, there was no operatic music, but the long fingers wrapped around my neck with so much force, I was shook out from my sleep at that instant.
Do you think I would concede defeat so easily? You are mine, and I'm going to claim you now.
As I feel myself slowly slipping away, I could hear someone calling me and shaking me awake. It was Dan.
I came back to check on you after sending my relative home. But Atai, what's wrong with you? Why are you suffocating yourself in your sleep?
It seems like what Dan saw was myself putting my hands around my neck to commit self-asphyxiation, instead of seeing the scary opera lady. Perhaps due to the guilt of swindling me 15,000 ringgit in total, Dan told me to stay over his place for the next few nights. It was all fine and dandy on the first night, but on the second night, I could hear the familiar opera music while sleeping on his living room couch. I sat up instantly and started scanning the perimeter of the dark living room to try locating her. After a few protracted scans, I saw her sticking her head out of the wall near the entrance, but somehow she could not proceed further inwards. Then, with a look of fear, she retreated, and I could feel a small tinge of victory rousing in me, and went back to sleep, concussed for almost half a day, recuperating all my extended period of lack of quality rest. By the time I woke up by then the next day afternoon, my eyes immediately were affixed by a majestic painting of Zhong Hui, the figure traditionally regarded as the vanquisher of ghosts and evil beings in Chinese mythology. Without much consideration, I went to do something I never thought I would, and went to the nearest tattoo parlor I could find and asked the artist to paint me a Zhong Hui portrait on my right forearm. I also asked around for a respectable temple to help me set up an altar to honor and pray for the deity. After that, I could still hear smatterings of the Chinese opera music and the singing, but it was distant and transient, and I think I had claimed my victory over her. While Atai felt compelled to do a tattoo of religious figures on himself, I would not advise people to do that, as I've heard of tattooing of such figures or even of devils or other related ominous presence, especially with eyes properly drawn and painted. There were scary stories of evil entities being able to infiltrate through such tattoos if you had not done proper religious ritual to bless your painted skin, or what we call kai guang. Similarly, one had to be careful when making offerings or praying to religious statues which have not been properly blessed. Next is a story from Cliff Stories, which gave us the perfect example of picking up stray, abandoned religious statues from the street. I am a practicing Taoist priest and had resolved queries and doldrums from people from all walks of life. One particular day, a young lad by the name of Tony, looking distraught and lost, dropped by my home temple and recounted a strange tale. Due to Tony studying in an university in Kuala Lumpur, he started lodging at the place of his paternal uncle and his wife. As they did not have any child of their own, they always doted Tony and treated him as their own kid. One fateful day, this makeshift family had their blissful days been awfully ruined. It began with Tony's uncle picking up a dubious statue of the Goddess of Mercy, or Guan Yin, along an usual shortcut on his way back from work. His uncle and auntie weren't particularly religious, but did have an altar to pay respect to the auntie's deceased parents. Somehow, after bringing back the statue, uncle started to behave weirdly, and when his wife confronted him about bringing back the Guan Yin statue, stating she had heard stories of things not ending well in such instances, uncle got uncharacteristically riled up and lambasted auntie for telling old wives' tales. When Tony had a closer observation of the statue, he realized that although the statue looked clean and pristine, it seemed to be defaced with black ink on the face of the deity. One look of the statue instantly gave Tony the chills, but what proceeded after that night was totally absurd and creepy. Uncle went to procure an incense burner and a mirror for praying to the statue. The creepiest aspect was that the mirror was those kind from the olden days, a copper mirror which, when you look at it, you always felt something was looming at your back. So a week passed, with uncle religiously offering joss sticks burning to the statue, uttering his prayers almost thrice daily. Then one evening, Tony was woken up from slumber by his auntie.
Tony, go check on your uncle. He's at the altar.
Blurry-eyed, Tony tried to compose himself before he was shook awake by what he saw from his uncle's actions. For some apparent reasons, uncle had snuck his wife's foundation powder and lipsticks and started dolling up in front of the copper mirror and humming an old school tune while doing so. Both Tony and his aunt were scared stiff and did not dare to wake his uncle and just let him do what he wanted. The next day, there was no makeup on uncle's face, and he went to work after breakfast like nothing had happened the night before. That day, when Tony came back from his tutorial classes and alone at home, he thought of getting rid of the copper mirror as requested by his auntie. His phone rang, and it was his uncle. It was like uncle was clairvoyant and had foreseen what was happening at home.
Tony, don't you dare touch anything on my altar.
Uncle sternly warned Tony. Things got from bad to worse. The following night, when the same thing happened, with uncle dolling himself in front of the altar, this time started to dance and prance around the living room like he was possessed in a very effeminate manner. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for Tony, which led him to seek my help. When we reached his uncle's place, I could audibly hear a man's frightened scream like something was threatening him. As we were close to the main entrance, I could hear the uncle shouting, "Don't come in!" Of course, we did not oblige, and when we stepped into the living room, we could see Tony's uncle cowering in fear at a small corner beside the altar. Tony's inauspicious feeling about the statue was not unfounded, and I could feel it for myself, getting a heavy dizzying feeling just by leering at it. Just as I tried to approach the altar, uncle immediately knelt and kowtowed towards the deity, blocking our approach. In an instant, we saw a 60-odd years old man be nimble and jumped to his feet, posing in the stance like he was going to fight us if we take another step forward. The stance looked very feminine and uber skin crawling. Immediately, I burnt a talisman in a bowl of blessed water before sprinkling it on Tony's uncle, and like a soul being extracted from his cast, uncle's body went soft and he dropped onto the floor. Tony and his auntie brought uncle to his room, and we proceeded with the complete procession to remove the deity statue. Firstly, I covered it with a piece of red rice paper before writing some inscriptions on it. Then we have to fully wrap it in multiple layers of old newspaper before I looked at my geomancy compass to find the most auspicious spot where I would take the statue out and break it into smithereens. At the exact moment the hammer dropped and smashing the porcelain statue, I could hear a harrowing scream emanating from the house. it was Tony's uncle. So, by this juncture, you should realize whatever that was residing in the statue is not a god or Zhen Shen, but an evil being waiting to consume Tony's uncle spiritually. The lesson to be learned here is to never pick up stray, abandoned, suspicious statues anywhere without proper consultation from proper masters or priests from legitimate temples. This story certainly reminded me of those statues being thrown at certain places which I have visited recently, which was a well-known place for people to discard such items. Actually, besides stray, abandoned statues you have picked up, even when you procure a brand new statue and hope to set an altar for it, you ought to do the proper kai guang, so to ensure you are praying to the legit deity and not something else. That's all from me tonight. Please click a like and share this video if you can. If you happen to stumble to our channel and like what you have seen, please subscribe to our channel for more ghost stories from around Asia and other parts of the world. 2025 will be a good year for everyone and world peace. Good night, Lights Out family.